see like the setup of it. All right, let me do a quick clap. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Discombobulated with Bobby Jaycox. And today I have a special guest, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. You're one of the first guests I'm having on this show. It means a lot to have him here. Ryan Stout, he is absolutely amazing. I already said your name first, and I fucked up how many things you've taught me about hosting. But
I like that like talking to you, I went from like, hey, do you want to be my first guest to now I'm down to like one of the first.
One of the yeah, I did. Well, I did say that, and then someone else said yes, and I was like, okay. I was like, I should probably do that. But it was you and Jeremy Essig.
Yeah, Jeremy, you're like, well, I'm looking at you, so I guess we'll just record you first.
Yeah.
But you could still like release him as episode 2.
I could.
Did you put him up on Monday?
I did put him up on Monday.
Oh,
I did.
okay.
Oh no, it's in the bonus. I haven't posted it yet, so I'll talk to the people. But you know him from so many things: MTV, Chelsea Lately, multiple 3, if I am correct, stand-up comedy albums. I love them very, very much. You mean a lot to me. You've done so many great things, ladies and gentlemen. Ryan Stout, everybody, you're here for this is kind of like 2 intros.
I can almost hear the applause.
Yeah, you could. yeah, I can. It is kind of fading though sometimes. I don't think I do it for that. Like I don't think I ever like be like, if I don't hear the audience anymore. Like I just like going up. Like even if it's not a lot of people, right?
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
The podcast is kind of new.
Oh,
It's kind
brand
of
new.
a new thing.
Brand new.
When you do an episode, just you.
Yes.
Do you do a big intro like that?
No.
Oh.
I gave you a big one because I got really excited. I'm really excited for you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm just thinking like, for consistency purposes, I thought you would just start the way you normally start. And then be like, oh, yeah, by the way, we also have a guest.
No.
Somebody to comment on my rambling.
No, yeah. Well, yeah, someone to comment on my rambling, which you're great at because you can like bring me back in. Like I need people like you who can, I go fucking off the, I go insane. And then you'll like, after I talk to someone who is so kind like you, I have friends like this, they'll go, okay, so to a couple of those points, like you'll know how to recap.
Let's dial it back.
Yeah.
You took a few forks in the road, but it was left, right, left.
Yeah.
But let's go back.
Yeah. Let's go back. Let's go back to the very beginning. Could you imagine though? But if I tried to rein it in, we were talking about that. Like if I tried to be like, yeah, and today we have Ryan Stout on.
I didn't even think rein it in. I just thought more like whatever you normally do, just do that again.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is there's no I don't really have any. I had no plans because I kept thinking forever about like an idea for a show, and I'm like, well, I'm very bad at doing that, like something consistently. And I'm not an expert on anything, and I'm like, I'm an expert on being like an idiot. So I feel like that would be fun to like share with the world.
But I mean, the whole idea of the podcast is that you don't have like a linear line from thought to thought.
No.
You're all over the place.
Very much all over the place.
You're discombobulated.
I am discombobulated.
So it's always going to be that.
It's always going to be that.
And that's what you're the expert in.
Yes, and it's like if someone tries to correct that, it's like don't try to fix my show. You know what I mean? And it's like, but you're someone who like, even though you're my guest, I would feel way more comfortable with you taking the reign. Like you would like.
Oh, I go on all sorts of people's podcasts and just host.
Because you're so good at it. We were talking about that earlier, but you're so good at knowing exactly where to go, how to drive it, and I'm like, it's like I'm driving the car, but you're like, I should have like a student host on the back of it.
Oh, I've still got a break on my side like a driver's ed teacher. Yeah. I was on somebody's podcast recently, and we were talking about something, and I just felt like it was the perfect transition. And I was like, so everybody be sure to sign up for the Patreon and get out there and support these guys.
Yeah.
We've got extra content. We've got this, like everything that I knew to pitch had come up in the conversation.
Yeah.
But they weren't pitching it to their listeners. And I'm like, well, this is just... We can't ignore how perfect this is now. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the business element.
Yes, and then they have to be like, okay, and we actually do have one more thing. But you try to like end it. Oh my God, that's
And then I'm
funny.
like, who else do you guys have on next week? Let me pitch them.
Yeah. But yeah, I think you're great at podcasts. Like I was listening to the ones that we were talking about earlier. I was listening to your podcast called that you were setting up. What was it called? You Hate Jokes?
You Hate Jokes.
And I was listening to it, and I said that I was like, if early on I had that pod, because when I first started, podcasts were like very infantile, barely, like really, really new. And I didn't know much about you before I had met you. And when you hear podcasts, you get to hear like who they really are.
Right.
And that's nice because when you see your stand-up, like I remember the first time when you came to the club, I was like, I'll probably stay out of this guy's way because he's just going to be like, oh, this guy won't shut the fuck up. But the opposite actually happened whenever I met you, which that's the only thing that I was like, the only real thing that I was like, I have to talk to you about is how we met, which is, I don't even know. I mean, I don't even think I'd be here at your house
in Los Angeles.
in Los Angeles without you. Because when I started stand up, if you don't know about how stand up works, you usually start as an open micer. You do a lot of open mics. People kind of recognize you, say your name, and then you start. And the quickest way
they start inviting you to shows. They're like, hey, it's not an open mic, but we're,
yes,
it's kind of like you've paid this little due. Like we know that you're not a mental case.
Yeah,
we know that you're serious about this.
We're going to toss
we'll
you
give
something.
you like a serious spot, which is not everybody can get it.
Yeah.
But you're at a bar, you're in front of 9 people instead of at an open mic in front of 25 comics.
Do you by chance know, because he was in St. Louis, and I'm sure you met, like when he passed, he lives in New York now. Do you know Kevin Casey White? Do you remember him?
Kevin Casey White? No.
Yeah. So he's a comic that I know, and you were talking about that. I did a couple open mics, and he had a show that he did in St. Louis at this place called Cicero's. It was called Bare Knuckle Comedy. And he was like, hey, man, we have a show. He's like, you should come out. And I go, yeah, man, thanks. But I had to work that day. So then I'm at work. I was at the firehouse, and this guy, I get a call, and he's like, hey, man, what are you doing? I go, oh, I'm at work. What are you doing? He goes, I'm at the show. And I go, cool. And he goes, yeah, why aren't you here? And I go, oh, man, I had to work. He goes, dude, we booked you on the show. I go, oh, no way. And he was like, yeah. And I go, oh, I can't come. I'm so sorry I'm at work, but can I do the next one? He's like, yeah, man, but side note, like, you should... You
needed that guidance to go all the way back to be like, we need to get you a calendar.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's get you a calendar and you can mark dates on it.
Yeah, and I'm like, all right. And even if I did, I'd be like, maybe go watch show. I didn't even know I was booked on it. I thought he was just inviting me to watch.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like too.
Yeah.
That maybe he wasn't clear. Maybe he hasn't done that much booking.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's true.
Maybe figure that out. Like communicate clearly.
Yeah, it's like a girl gave me her number and I text her, but it's like to help me move. I'm like, oh, I didn't know you gave it to me because you like me. Oh,
yeah, I thought.
I'm such a fucking.
I thought you were just volunteering, like lend a hand here and there.
Oh my god! But yeah, it was. So when you start, you do like open mics. Some people give you some spots, like do that. And I might have hosted like a night or like a weekend, maybe at like another. This is my first weekend at the Funny Bone, and it was really special because it's like you said, you start off there, you do showcases, then you're a host, you host the entire show, you bring up all the comics, then to the feature spot, which is like in the middle. Usually, sometimes the headliner brings you with them, or the club books you. And then there's the headliner. How I met you when you were headlining clubs. You were going all over. It's cool because you were one of the first guys too that I saw that I'm like, to see people that you were watched just on TV, not like that you watched on TV growing up, like that you're like, I just saw this guy and you know what I mean? Like, he's
3 weeks ago and now he's in front of me.
Yeah, he's in front of you. You're like, it feels weird. It just feels so, you're like, you don't even know what to do that. And so I remember I was at the club and I just was doing the open mic, and I want to know your recollection on this, because I've told this story so many times, it meant a lot to me. But I did the open mic, and afterwards they came up, and I don't remember who told me, so I don't want to short, but they were just like, hey, you're hosting this weekend, so whatever. And I was like, really? And they're like, yeah. And basically a host had fallen through and couldn't do the show, and you had said, if I remember correctly, you go, well, can I pick from the open mic? And they go, yeah. They go, how about Bobby Jaycox? And they were like, what? He hasn't hosted or anything. No, like, no, try again. Like they were like, no, pick someone else. And you're like, I thought he did great. I thought he had a good time. I think I could help, like maybe help him or whatever. But I knew that you had picked me out, and you're like, hey, come host this weekend, and that meant so much to me. We can pull that apart, but I want to know what happened from your perspective. If you were just like, well, how about we do it and how about we get a bad host so the rest of the show looks great? You know what I mean?
I like a nice damage act up front.
Yeah.
I like to really, take the audience's confidence away.
Yeah.
And then build them back up later.
Yeah.
No, I think most of that is pretty much in line with what I remember. I always kind of ask, like, who's hosting this weekend? Who's on the show?
Yes.
And it's rare that whoever's hosting Tuesday is actually there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
And so I was there on Tuesday. I had showed up early because
you always did, which I always thought was cool. Like most comics, a lot of them, especially during that time, every once in a while you would get like Orion Stout coming to town and performing on the open mic, watching the whole show. But usually the comic would just show up on the night they were performing. But you would show up sometimes 1 to 2 days early, depending on, like you said, Tuesday, so you're there Wednesday too.
Sure. Sometimes it just, the road works out that way.
Yeah.
You're like, it's easier to go to St. Louis now than it is to wait in this other city a day.
Yes.
And then coming from Los Angeles, just with the way flights are timed.
Yes.
It's almost like if I want to take a direct flight, either I'm going to get there at 6 p.m.
Yes.
And then have to like rush to the club, which I never want to do.
Or like 10 a.m.
Or I get there at, 10 a.m. and I have to wake up in LA at 4.
And you can't check into the hotel. Yeah. Like, can you
like,
wait with your luggage anywhere in the city?
So I end up showing up on that 6 p.m. flight the day before.
Yes.
So I showed up. I go to the open mic. Things are happening. And I was like, who's hosting? And the response was literally like a shrug and then a gesture toward the stage and pick somebody.
Yeah.
And I went, really? Yeah. And then so I picked you and they went, really?
Yeah.
But he's never hosted here before. And I was like, that doesn't matter to me. We'll build him up.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Damn.
And I think that was the other thing too, which is a lot of clubs struggle for opening acts.
Yes.
You know, a lot of them complain. They're like, well, we have these opening acts, but none of them know how to host. And it's like, well, did you teach them how to host?
No.
No, you did not. You just expected them to know how.
Yeah.
And so there's just the very smallest bit of like, hey, when you're up there, do this, remember to do that, and do this other thing.
Yeah.
Just remember that a lot of these people who are at the show don't know what to expect.
Yes.
So you're their connection with what to expect.
You're right.
So, like, let them know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Let them know you have 3 comics tonight. I'm going to be up here for 15. And then your feature act. And then your headliner's going to be here. Everybody, round of applause for them.
Yes.
And you just kind of, like, teach the crowd to get into a rhythm.
Yes.
Of, like, setup,
yeah,
punchline, setup, punchline. I talk, I stop talking, you laugh.
Yeah.
I talk, I stop talking, you laugh.
Yes.
Like, they need that, like, momentum.
They do.
Otherwise,
and the clubs don't teach you that. You think that there's like a course or something, like every once in a while maybe, but I remember you, and around that time they started like really trying to foster actually caring about that, because sometimes most comics will just be like, and it's a testament to how much you care about the craft. Most comics will just be like not on stage, but even afterwards be like, yeah, so I guess the host just sucks this week. But you were like, I don't like how that feels, so I'll fix that. And you're fixing a scene. You're not even fixing a host you bring on the road. You're just like, I'll fix this because I'm going to be coming back here and I want this to be better.
Right.
And that's such a kind thing to do, to take time out of your day, because most comics, it's so tiring traveling on the road. I'm just finding this out more now. But you knew how tiring it was, but to still be like, I care about all these things is so important, to stand up in why I'm here and why I get to do stuff now.
Sure, and I think I felt a little wronged that I had to learn them on my own.
Yeah.
And people could have saved me a ton of time.
So much time.
Just by being like, oh, let me give you an hour of advice.
Yeah.
And then you'll know a lot of the stepping stones you need to know.
Yeah.
And so I decided, well, I'm just going to start offering people, what they might not know.
Yeah.
And I try to do it with you had never hosted.
No.
So it was
like maybe like the open mic or something, but never like a weekend, which is so different. Right. So it's like bike to car or something like that. I don't even know. It's so different.
So it was a lot easier to be like, well, you don't have any preconceived notions, so this is going to be a lot.
Yes.
You're not going to show any resistance to the idea that like, hey, this audience, a lot of them are drunk.
Yes.
They don't really know what live stand-up comedy looks like.
Yes.
Some of them, it's their first time here.
Yes.
A lot of them, everything they think they know about comedy is some cliche they learned from TV.
Uh-huh.
So we kind of have to break them a little bit.
Yeah, you're right.
Break them back into reality and let them like change their expectations, because their expectations will ruin this whole thing for us.
You're right. And it's weird because you kind of think that they're adults, and like you also think that people show up in like, you kind of put on what you're like, I want to see a great show and I'm going to be a great audience. But like you said, some of them had an argument earlier, whatever, and they show up, and you do have to tell adults how to be a thing they've been so many times. Before a movie, they're like, hey, silence your cell phones and don't do anything. But before a comedy show, you have to be like, I can't believe you have to say it again. The waitress has told you. We've all said it many times. Shut up. And then people will literally be like, I was helping the show. Yeah. I had a guy say, he goes, I was helping your show. And I was like, and they might be right. You might not be doing good, but you're not helping almost anything.
Yeah. I mean, they have these intentions that are good, but it's based on misinformation.
Yes.
I had a comedy club manager tell me that she had to escort an entire family out of the showroom because they just wouldn't stop. Yeah. And not only that, but they were late to the show and then started heckling.
Yes.
And so everybody in the show was already having a great time. Yeah. And then everybody's like, who are these people?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
And then the manager's trying to explain that to them, and they're like, no, but it's part of comedy. Yeah. And she's like, I work in comedy. And they're like, no, but like, and she told me the son in the family group, the son was like, well, have you ever watched like a Dave Chappelle special. And I was sitting there and I was like, so did you ask him, like, right, which specials was he being heckled in?
Yeah.
Please tell me.
Yeah.
Tell me which special you're referring to.
Yes.
And I can guarantee you it wasn't 20 minutes of him dealing with a heckler.
No.
I can guarantee it wasn't an hour of him dealing with a heckler.
Not at all.
It might have been an instance,
Yes.
15 seconds that you're replaying in your mind as the entire thing.
Yes.
But you're wrong.
Yeah. Well, it goes to that thing of like people being crazy. We've been kind of talking about that this week with like people that you might know or whatever that you're just like, what is they're off their rocker. Like what is going on? And people have this thing in their head where they think they're right. Like there was actually these guys who a couple of them used to work at the firehouse with me. And a couple of them worked at this restaurant where I worked when I was like a kid. And I get this phone call, and they were at the Funny Bone in St. Louis. And I get this phone call, and they go, Bobby, what's up, man? Sorry, dude, we're getting kicked out of the Funny Bone right now. And I was like, okay.
What'd you guys do?
That's why I go, what happened? They go, well, so we weren't talking. And it was like, you know, it's like a kid coming home from school and be like, so listen, I didn't hit the kid. It's like you're already like, okay, you're not even defending yourself very well. Yeah. And they're like, we're at the club and we were talking. Okay, so we were talking to each other. I don't get like, and it's like you were talking to each other. You know what I mean? Like they were like, I had friends one time bring a cooler in, like the amount of things people think you can do at a club. They're like, so we're drinking, we're having a good time, and we're talking. They try to kick us out. And here's what's crazy: on the way out, we said we knew you, and they didn't care at all. I was like, oh, I'm sure they didn't care. They might care about letting me work there again, but I actually saw them recently. I told them about that, and they go, oh, we knew you didn't. Like, they were like, we know you're not those people. You've been here enough. We have enough credit. Yeah. But I love that on the way there out, they're like, we know a low-level headliner. Like, like, that's crazy.
The number of times that happens where somebody's like, what do you mean I can't set off bottle rockets in the club?
Dude, they really do.
About?
Yes.
Yes. And it's this wild, like, you don't even know where they get these ideas from, that it's like a free-for-all in there.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's tied to this concept of like, they think, oh, the customer's always right.
Yes.
And so therefore, I'm a customer. Yeah. And since I'm always right, I get to do whatever I want.
Maybe, yeah. And for me, I always think that I'm like, whenever I see that, I try to remember how I felt when I went to the Funny Bone a couple times before I signed up, because I was reading Judy Carter's book, and I was like, I want to go see it, and then I want to like try it, but I want to see what it feels like at an actual open mic, because you only watch it on TV and specials and stuff. Right. And so I went out, and there's a part when you're like sitting up front that you're like, I remember having this, and it's a delusion, but I remember being like, maybe I should pipe up, because then they'll be like, come get up here, you crazy son of a bitch, which it's like a psychosis, but get up here, and then everyone is losing their minds. But I think people don't realize how far off they are from actually performing stand-up, because making your friends laugh is different. And some people can translate how they make their friends laugh to stage, but I feel like for most people, it's like you have to shift gears a little bit on how you're talking. Like how, just like we were explaining with you, where you're like, I'm a gear on stage, and then off stage, you're still Ryan Stout. Some people are way different, but you're like, I'm still Ryan, but I'm also not everything is like as paced. I'm like going to listen, and I'm going to be attentive and have real opinions that I didn't just have up there that were so quick and stuff. Take more time to think and stuff. Yeah.
I'm so glad you did that and brought it back around to where we started, because I was getting ready to do that, and I'm like, well, am I going to have to host this thing?
No.
No, Bobby's going to host it. Great.
I work very hard on controlling my ADHD, because I see people when they lose control of it, and I'm like, I do go crazy, and that's who I am, but I can't just end up being like, and then eventually the mic's down and we're not even doing the podcast anymore. I'm like, we could.
You're hanging out the window.
Yeah, exactly. I tried.
Look how sunny it is.
Yeah, but I do try.
I was going to talk about me on stage versus off stage, Bobby.
Yeah, Bobby, come here. Hey, come here.
There's a bird.
No, but you are very, you're very you, but different.
The thing that I always tell people is like, everybody thinks they're like one step away from stand-up comedy because they are funny around their friends. Yes. And I'm like, yes, but how are you around a big group of strangers who doesn't love you? Yes. They don't love you, and if you don't make them laugh, now they dislike you. Yes. So off stage, around people that I love, I will listen, I give them time, I take in what they say.
You're incredible at it.
But when I'm on stage, I totally understand. I mean, people say, know your audience. Okay, great. Let me tell you who the audience is of the comedy club. Yes. A lot of them have undiagnosed personality disorders. Yeah. A lot of them have alcohol and drug problems. Yes. A lot of them have medications that they should be on, or they were on and have chosen to go off of. Like, it is a hodgepodge of just chaos out there.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the one thing that links them all together is none of them have been formally taught anything at all about stand-up comedy.
No.
It's not like the ballet where most people at the ballet are like, oh, well, I'm here to appreciate these things.
Yeah.
I don't go to the ballet because I don't know anything about the ballet.
So when you go there, they need to set up like a level of you understanding without being too direct.
Everybody who goes into the art gallery kind of understands like, well, in order to take something from this, I need to know about art.
Yes.
Everybody who goes into, a poetry reading is like, well, I don't really know a lot about poetry, even though it was taught to me in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, all throughout college. I've had so much class in poetry, but I go to a poetry reading and I'm like, I don't really know about poetry. Meanwhile, stand-up comedy club, nobody's ever been formally given any facts about stand-up, and yet all of them go in and sit down like, I know what's going on here, and I'll decide.
You're so right. They don't teach you stand-up. They don't even teach a class on, even in it's called drama. It's not comedy, tragic drama. It's nothing like that. You're like, they don't teach it at all. They teach you all this stuff, and you know how to act. But for stand-up, they're like, I get it probably more than anyone here. Yeah. Holy shit, you're right.
And it's the basic Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah.
I know that's been talked about a lot on the internet for the past 10 years. But, the less you know about something, the more you think you know about it.
Yes.
And so I know that when I do stand-up, I'm performing for strangers who think they know just as much, if not more, than I do about stand-up comedy.
Yes.
And so I have to be in charge.
Yeah.
I have to be the leader. I have to crush dissent when it pops up.
Yes.
I have to make sure the show is focused. And then once I get a laugh, well, now it's my job to move on to the next thing that gets a laugh. There's no veering away to like make points or, make a political speech or talk about my victimization. None of that. No, we're getting to the next laugh. I lead you to the next laugh. But when I'm hanging out with people, I don't need to lead. No. I'm not a leader for anything.
No.
We're just
you are truly an incredible listener, because I remember back whenever I first met you, I remember us talking about, and we can get into that, but like talking about stand-up or whatever too. But then I remember like probably the last time I stayed here, when I was coming out here to watch Who'd Eat Your Dog, and we were going to do all that stuff. I remember we were in your apartment sitting down and just talking, and we had conversations. We'd been like buddies, but just like how we were sitting there and how kind you were, like, and it was just this extra thing where I was like, whoa, Ryan's good at like even extra more than I knew. And you never seemed like a guy who would take the whole time and talk like, that's what I'll do. Like, but you're really good at listening, and we would talk about stuff. And I remember I said last time I was here, I was going through something and I had the wrong feeling on the word grateful. And I was like, I think grateful's kind of dumb. And I remember you looked at me, and then you looked at your wife, Stacey, and you kind of made like this face, and he goes, so Ryan's looking at us like that because I've actually been every morning writing things I am grateful. Like today I was like, I'm grateful that I get to like meet Bobby and all this stuff. And I was like, you're right. But like, you just, not only did you see that, you also remembered what this person had said. And it's like, you're so good at doing that. Where like, I've seen people in a conversation, you'll tell them something, then later they're like, sorry, where are we going to eat after this? You know what I mean? Like I bounce it back and forth between. Sometimes I am really good at listening, and sometimes I let it run really, really hard. But you're great at it. You're really good at it.
Well, and I've been, especially with my wife, I've been married long enough that I totally identify on the little bits and pieces that I know that she will remember.
Yes.
And then my brain says, well, you don't have to remember those.
Yes.
Because she remembers.
It's a good team. Yeah.
Yeah, which is why when a lot of people get divorced, they fall apart, because they're like, fuck, half my brain is
How
gone.
do I do laundry? Yes.
Yeah.
And true, like that's a more packy thing that I said. You're right. Half of my brain is gone, because like I've even been out with me and my ex. We were out one time, and I just asked her, I go, where are we? Mm-hmm. And we were walking around. She goes, I don't know. And I go, that's cool, but it's crazy how much you just like. And I've been out with my best friend growing up, Briggs, dude. I love this dude. We were walking the other day. He goes, wait, where are we? And I go, dude, I'm boyfriending you right now. I was just like, where are we? Like, I didn't know. I was letting him lead. And sometimes you just naturally do that in a relationship, is let people kind of take the lead. And sometimes you kind of co-pilot a little bit and take a break, and then it goes back and forth.
Well, and I think with my wife and I, we both recognize almost instantaneously, without thinking about it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a detail he'll remember. That's a detail she'll remember.
Yes.
And so we are making these mental choices.
Yes.
And it's a safety thing.
Yeah.
And because we know that as a team we have all the information.
You're right.
But it's also like, well, she's going to remember that particular brand of, chicken or whatever, because I'm not savvy enough to know all the other brands of chicken.
Right.
So I don't even know where to place this one.
Right.
Whereas she is like very conscious about how the animals are raised. She's very conscious about how it's prepared. Like any raw chicken that's like sitting in liquid for a long time before it's processed is just a breeding ground for bacteria.
Yeah.
And she knows those things.
Yes.
Whereas I don't really know that process.
Yeah.
And I don't know which different brands have the different processes.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the detail of what brand of chicken was that, I'm like, she's got it. I'm out.
Yeah. And I'm so stupid. I'd be like, how do you want your chicken? I'm like, rare. You know what I mean? Like, they're like, you can't do that. I'm like, it's not like that kind of meat. Like, I remember literally thinking that. I remember asking one time, I was like, I think it can be raw. Like, that's how sometimes you're so far off. But I remember like my parents never let me cook. Like, my mom was like, you don't cook. Like, you'll burn the house down. And so you don't know those things. But whenever because you're like, oh, I don't have to. Mom's going to take care of it. But then as you grow up, whenever it has more of like an adult attachment and stuff like that, it's nice. Yeah. But yeah, you guys I can just tell you guys are such a good team because I see how you guys have, whenever we go out and do stuff, like even the other day, whenever we parked, like we were walking in, Stacey goes, hey, just so you know, you're like on the red, like neither of us noticed at all. And she was just noticed that you were there. And it's like, I think that's always what I think is cuter in relationships than when someone's like, I can't even think of a good example, but like, oh my God, they take pictures and they have the same outfit on. I think it's those things whenever someone just like helps you with something you didn't notice. I always think that's like a cuter kind of love to like someone help, be like, hey, I grabbed his socks because he'll always.
And that's actually like so related to another thing, which she knew that I was driving her car, which is a little longer than my car.
Yes.
So she immediately clocks into the idea of, oh, he might not realize that he's driving the longer car.
Yeah.
So I'm going to check, and then I'm going to inform him.
Yes.
And then, even better than this, because, again, people don't like being told they're wrong.
No.
But she tells me, hey, you're in the red a little bit, and I could have been like, why do you always do this?
Yes.
Why do you embarrass me in front of Bobby?
And that's not what the line's
Instead,
about.
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then I moved up.
Yes.
Which is, I would hope a better way to respond.
It was, and I even remember being like, because I was like, because those, what's crazy is, and this wasn't on you guys, but this is just when you're hanging out with a couple, sometimes it gets like intense. You never know if it's going to get tense. It just can. Sometimes people do it, and people are weird. But whenever that happened, like that is a thing that just like my parents would get in arguments about weird stuff. So whenever they said that, I just remember my first reaction trying to be that I was like. Yeah, I was like, I actually remember the last time I was here. And it's true. I got a ticket because I was in New York. I was barely in the thing. And then all of a sudden we were just past that moment. And I was like, oh, they have such love that they didn't do what I'm used to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought this was going to be a catalyst for a fight.
Oh, I thought we weren't going to get to have Fogo. Yeah.
They were actually just repositioning the car.
Yes. But they're not going to break up. They just are parking. Yeah. Where I'm like, everything's a big thing. But yeah. And that was, to truly bring it back of the stand-up thing, you are good at like noticing those things, like you said, with like stand-ups and stuff too, because I wasn't the only person you helped. Like you really, I felt fostered. I remember there was media. The clubs don't always do this, but I remember there was this time period where everyone felt focused to be like, come in early. And I remember when you would come into town, comics would get so excited. And you would always try to come out to open mics as a comic, but there were certain times you're like, Ryan will come in early. And you would like I remember people would say stuff to the effect of like, well, I want to try something new, but like Ryan said, you know what I mean? Like you knew who was watching you and they might give you pointers or something, but like just even how you would talk to comics and stuff was always nice. Cause one thing we talked about this last time I was here, I remember, and I didn't remember you were the one who told me that, is that I was like, when you go on stage, you have to teach them how to be an audience. And I remember Brett Terhune was one of the first, he goes, I just start clapping. And a bunch of dumb adults are like, me too. They're like, you're in charge. You clap, I clap. Let's do that. There's like a mental thing you do. But you were always really good at like being like, hey, let's just get into it. Like you were talking to her, like I go from joke to joke to joke. Where for me, I think at the beginning I was like a little bit wanted to be funny. But like if at any point the audience was like, we love you, I'd be like, you do. Like that's what I was a little bit searching for that. And then you find out that's not going to be there. So you hope the thing you do, you actually love. And I could always tell that you did because you were so into it. And then after the show, you could have just sat and laughed with there was towering comics around all the time in St. Louis for this period of time. You could have just hung out, but you were just like, hey, you know that thing you do? If you just did this, that's great. But hey, take it or leave it. And I always remember you said that because you're like, I don't know the best, but I do have a pretty good track record because you're like a very cause and effect guy. You're like, I've done this and it's worked, but if you want to keep being insane, I'll talk about you behind your back as it's funny. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I am disappointed in that, just like we're never really taught to host.
Yes.
And the audience is never taught how to be an audience.
Yes.
The idea of comedians offering each other helpful advice isn't something that is very common.
Yeah.
People will tag jokes.
Yes.
Hey, you did that thing. I was thinking after you could do this.
Yes.
But there's never, the way that you do that, the way that you execute that idea of like, hey, I was thinking you could do this.
Yeah.
Some comics come across very rude when they say that. Like, I know better than you do.
Yes. And it almost like starts a fight. Someone's like, hey, I think you should maybe do this. And they're like, what? And it's never, but it's there. People are trying to help, but even friends of mine, you'll try to say something to them and they will take it to heart. And you're like, I didn't mean it like that at all.
Well, and the funniest is when it's like a comedian who is very drawn to doing like act outs, talking to somebody who doesn't do a lot of act outs, and he's like, and then what you could do is you could be like you're swinging the bat, and then you're like hit back, and then you're like, wow, you're reenacting a whole event on stage. That guy's never done an act out in his life.
Yes.
And you're telling him that for that one joke, he should do a full one act play.
And that's another thing they never teach you. Definitely no comic has ever taught how to give a tag better to someone else. No one's taught it like how to say it. And like I'm sure you're great at that, because I remember you're really good at like helping someone realize why the car's not running. And I even feel like some people might be like, hey, you need gas. And it's like, that's very direct. And you're like, you're right. If I did put gas in it, would run. And you might be like, hey, do you know if you keep gas in it and you change the oil, the whole thing's gonna run? Like we were talking about systems this week. Like
when you turn the key
thing.
and you hear that clicking.
Yes.
Yeah. That means your battery's dead.
Yes.
And that's probably because your alternator died. But you probably got gas in there.
No,
right?
dude, my dad had a battery his whole life. Like some people will literally defend it like that, and you're like, you can just keep. I don't have a bad car.
Yeah.
It literally doesn't affect me.
It could be clicking for another reason.
But we are about to get on the highway, and you're the host, so you're going to go before me. And I'd rather not get broken down before I get out on the highway.
The other thing is I always give the benefit of the doubt that whatever I'm about to say, you've already thought of.
Yes.
Because it's your bit.
Yes.
And so a lot of times I will start with, hey, you do that bit about the thing. I don't know if you've ever considered this idea. Have you ever played with anything like that?
Yes.
And if they go, yeah, I go, and what was the result? Like, how did that work?
Yes.
Like, it's more me being interested in their process.
And I think everyone would listen to you. You're so direct that if you were just like, if you talk to like assholes do, like there's so many, like last night, dude, a guy who's, no offense, I think he's like I think he was an open micer. And I've been doing this for a long time, but we showed up at that mic. And afterwards, I was high, whatever. He goes, I don't remember if he said off stage or on stage, but he goes, hey man, you like move around too much. And I just go, yeah, I do. And I just turned away because I was like, oh, I definitely don't need, I'm past knowing that, because I'm not like, what? I do? My anxiety is everywhere. I'm like, what?
Oh my God.
Oh, you're insane. Yeah. And I was like, thanks, man. But some people want to help, but like, I really will listen to like anyone's advice if I think it's coming from an honest place, even if they give it in a shitty way. But like you said, you had taught me early on to like take what you want and don't, but you'll let people realize it, because people need to know it's them. People need to know they realize it. Otherwise, if you just tell them, they're like, thanks, man. But they would listen to you because you have such a leader role. If you were just like if you would have told me don't do any of those jokes you do right now and were just as nice as you were, I 100% would have done that. 100% would have done that.
Yeah. It's funny too. Like I always wonder too, like what is the value of the information I'm about to give?
Yes.
Like you move around too much is not it. That is such a generalized statement.
Yes.
That could mean so many things.
Anything.
One thing I've noticed about you over the past like 4 days is you're one of the few comics that will move with like, you'll almost like do an act out that starts with your shoulders.
Yeah.
Like your shoulders will pop back or you'll literally start moving and you'll start like going that way with your shoulders.
Yeah.
And then your feet follow. And I'm like, I don't know anybody else who that's like your gravitational center.
I do move like a kid who can't draw very well. I move like a kid would do with his like they're just like, well, I'll move his head and then you're like, I forgot his feet. Yeah, like how like someone would shittily animate something.
But even that, like I wouldn't say don't do that. I would be like, you might be the only one who does that.
Yeah.
So maybe you need to like do more of that.
This girl I worked with one time, I would do impersonation because I don't really do impersonations of like some comics can be like, oh, this is my De Niro. I can do impersonations of just people somehow really well. Like I'll just notice those things and do like the funny, like the 3 things I noticed. And we were at work and I was roasting everybody. And then someone goes, wait, what about Bobby? And this girl, all she did is just stood up and walked without moving her arms and like with her head forward, like you said, like just walking forward with her head. And everyone's eyes like, that is what he does. He's fast and he moves around like he doesn't even swing his arms. And I'm like, I do move head first or whatever. But yeah, but that was the thing back in the day. If someone said something, they'd be like, hey, here's the thing you do. I'm like, do I need to change it? And you, like you said, only change it if you think it helps the thing you're gonna do. Like if someone like a car, like if a car is loud and someone's like, I love how fast it goes, but it's also loud. You have to be like, I can only change that so much before it won't do the first thing you liked or whatever. You know what I mean? Like how we've been talking about how I'm like, I've taken Adderall in the past, like I was prescribed it, but it almost controlled me too much to where then I'm losing my thoughts. So if I go crazy with my thoughts, that's bad. But if I control them enough, so it's like trying to find
constraining. You're right. I know for me, one of the big things throughout my entire life is that people have said, you go too fast. You're going too fast. And by the way, they're not just saying that I speak too fast.
Yeah, because I don't get that.
It's like, Ryan, your mind is moving a mile a minute.
Yeah.
And because you've gone so many steps in advance, now you've got this like anxiety going.
Yeah.
That really doesn't need to be there because we're not even at step 60.
Yes.
We're at step 2.
Yes.
You're projecting like this horror show.
Yeah, you're exporting the file and you don't even have the files.
Yeah. And then you're like, it's not working.
Yeah.
We didn't edit anything. Stop screaming. I'm spraying the computer with a fire hydrant.
So you're going
the fire extinguisher's just everywhere. Yeah.
Yes. Why is everything is wrong? You're like, well, you're just not there yet.
It was going to overheat.
Yes.
Calm down.
Yes.
So import the file.
Yes.
And so mentally moving way too fast, too many expectations on things, put myself in just a bad mental space sometimes.
Yeah.
And so usually a lot of times my mouth will be trying to catch up to where my mind is.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will be like, I'm lost.
Yeah.
And so I had to write on paper and figure out what I wanted.
Yeah.
Before I could put it on the stage.
Right.
And if I get on stage and just have like a bunch of feelings and ideas, it's a lot of, I will ramp up into a lot of fast talking. And it all kind of sounds the same.
Yes.
And it's not differentiated in any way.
Hallelujah.
And the audience doesn't know what to do or think.
And then you don't know what to do or think. You start to get real lost in that
What's
moment
amazing
together.
is I watched a comic do a set on Conan where, to be honest, that comic on stage oftentimes is very worked up, very energetic, very fast-paced.
Mm-hmm.
But you watch late night TV and the crowd isn't there to see stand-up.
No.
Ever.
No.
They're there to see Conan.
Even the ones that live are not there to see stand-up.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, that was a good piece of advice I got from JP Buck when he was booking Conan. He booked me. He was like, hey, remember, Ryan, these people aren't there to see stand-up.
Yeah.
You're the third guest. You could be a band. You could be a magician.
Yes.
You could be bumped because our second guest was great and went long.
Yeah.
Nobody knows you're there.
Yes.
So you can't really treat them like a stand-up comedy crowd. This is a crowd of people who loves Conan.
Yes.
And so I'm watching this other comic do Conan, and he comes out there, and A, he treats them like they bought tickets to see him.
Yes. B,
he's moving so fast that the trained studio audience is like, we will laugh as a group if you give us a pause to do that.
Yeah.
Even if you just give us a generic pause, like we'll all laugh in unison because we want the TV to go well.
They're like built up inside of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet he never paused, and he just like, at this point, and then that thing.
That's what I would do.
Okay, good night.
I'm almost glad it's going away. I would bomb.
And then it was like, soon after that comic was like, I want to make sure that never airs. I want to make sure that's taken down off the internet. I want to, I can't believe my representatives would put me in that position to do that show. Like totally not my crowd.
Yeah.
And it was like, you see how you're going fast right now again? You need to slow it down a lot.
Yeah, it's all the time.
You just slow it down a lot.
Yeah.
And so when I see videos of myself where I'm paced like a human being.
Yes.
And I'm hitting the setup and hitting the punchline, sometimes they'll just be like, there you go.
Yeah.
That'll do, pig.
Yeah,
good for you.
Yeah, that'll do, pig. Yes,
and
that's
so
how it
like
feels.
we were talking about watching stand up of yourself and how like Again, comics aren't even taught what to look for when they watch themselves. Instead, they just let their consumer mind drive the judgment rather than their creative mind be like, oh, that thing you did was difficult, and that thing is usually hard for you to do, but you did it well there, and like look at the elements. Look at how the elements are coming together.
Yeah.
It's not a catastrophe. It's
No.
also not a monumental achievement.
No.
And even if it were, your poor quality video isn't gonna.
No.
We don't put that in the vault.
No, you're right. And it's such a hard thing when you start stand up to like tell someone that like you have to fall in love with the process. And I know we've been talking about that this week. And like I don't even know what processes I ever had before stand up, or probably before meeting you. Because even with stand up, it was like I had these ideas, and like the first time I did stand up, my best friend Chris Briggs, if I wouldn't have had him, I would have been like one of those guys that did like a mic, probably kept telling everyone I did it, but like I would have been like, it went so okay, and I didn't know how to like formulate things. But he would be like he gave me some of my first punchlines. Like he was like, that is funny, but what if you said this? I'm like, that's right. And he helped me out with so many of those things. And then when I started making these systems, you realize like, oh, this is how this works. And even though I do talk fast and I want to do stuff, I really always want to learn. Like I do have that. I mean, I think maybe you saw that whenever you sat me down, which I want to talk about, and we talked about our stand-up and stuff. But I always just remember watching you and being like, if you see someone do something better than you, like learn from them. And I don't know where that came from, because even when I was younger, I kind of always watched people and tried to do stuff, but I would be bad because even I would watch someone skateboard and I would still try to flip it real hard, and they're like, no, just your foot. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then I go to do it, and I'm like, wah! And I would do this big move because it feels big to me.
Yeah.
And you start to watch someone do it well and be like, just slow down. Like the first time you slow down.
It's real small.
Yeah.
Just flip the one foot.
Yeah, just flip. Yeah, just one tiny
Jump,
thing.
move your foot like that, and the board spins. It's okay. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Don't flail.
Don't flail. And we would go off this ramp when I was a kid, and I told my buddy, I go, do you remember at 602, I would jump off this ramp, and I always pretended I was trying to land like the biggest trick, but I was so scared to go off it that I would just be throwing my board and land and then be like, fuck. And he goes, I do remember that. We all were like, what does he think we think? Do you think he thinks he's trying to land a 900 right now? I'm just like spinning and my board's going off. But like stand-up was the first thing that I really was trying, and I was like, I don't even want to hang out. Like I have to be good at this. Like skateboarding, I just want to hang out with. But I remember when I would watch you were this guy that like you would see comics come through, and so many comics from that time that would come through at comedy clubs, they would do this thing where they it was funny, and I'm not trying to say there's a right way or wrong. It was wrong or it was funny for them to be like, fuck you, and give up on the audience. I would love that they would be like, fuck you. But you were one of those people that I really, really enjoyed watching, because you would go on stage, and I remember like we were talking about different gears, but you even on stage would give a different, and not performance in the way, but just like what speed you were gonna do, because you go on stage, and I remember you'd be like, how's everybody doing? And if it was like different, you wouldn't fake that. You and Josh Arnold helped me with that, because some people would be like, just do your jokes, and you guys were like, no, I have to acknowledge what's going on in the room, and you would go, oh. And it was never, you didn't like, there wasn't like three ways, like if the crowd's awesome, if they're bad, if they're this. You would just go, oh, okay. And I remember there were some times where maybe I don't remember you not cussing, but there were sometimes you would be cleaner, and then you'd be like, wow, if you guys think I give a living fuck about, and you would just win them over by making fun of them, but not being an asshole. And you would think that you could just be like, look at this poor piece of shit, or so you could like easily do it. But I always was inspired by how you handled yourself on stage to get the outcome that you want. Like you're saying, like my outcome isn't just that I'm here and I had the first two sets and they were good. You're like, even though it's a midnight show, I'd like if this didn't feel like a waste of time. And you were always really good at that, and I would admired that a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, the biggest struggle, which is, when you talk about being a leader for a group of strangers.
Yeah.
But you don't know anything about the group until you're already talking to them.
Yes.
And, everybody who's ever seen stand-up comedy, they think of the audience as like the people around them.
Yes.
And you go, yeah, well, the people who were around you were really young and energetic. And if you would have gone to the Late Show, the people around you would have been exhausted and drunk.
Yes.
So, you can't just judge based on the audience you were with.
Yes.
You have to imagine there are other audiences.
Yeah, you're right.
And people who watch stand-up they haven't seen a lot of audiences.
Most people at a show are like, this is our first time. Like every show, it's wild how many people are like, this is the first time ever at a comedy show.
I feel like I was being criticized by some younger college-age girl after a show in Minneapolis, and she was really being condescending about, like, you're talking about some things and people could be really offended. And I went, yeah, they could be.
Yeah.
I was like, but that's not really, they could also laugh. I said they're kind of two emotions.
Yes.
And she was like, well, I mean, do you think that you could just offend people? Like, do you think you have that right? And I was like, I don't think I could avoid it.
Yeah.
I think I could offend them no matter what.
Yeah,
and she was like, well, I feel like I'm giving you good feedback here. And I've seen a lot of stand-up comedy. And I went, well, I've seen a lot of audiences.
Yeah.
And it's just this, clearly everything she said, I was like, well, there's another side of the coin.
Yes.
And then there's this. Yeah. And you're right. And it's the other side is there too, though.
God.
And it's a lot about not like denying that what people are saying is fundamentally has some truth in it.
Yeah.
But once you see a lot of audiences, you realize like, okay, in this situation, if I get louder and more energetic, they're not going to come along with me.
Yes.
One of my big moments of learning that, I was watching Bill Santiago perform in a bar in the Bay Area, and all of us, including me, we were getting up in this bar and we were just trying to fight back with noise and energy.
Yeah.
And the bar was rowdy.
Oh, yeah.
And Bill got up there and he didn't say anything, and he took the mic out of the stand and moved the stand, and he kind of like looked around the room, and the crowd just settled in like, okay, whatever he's going to say must be important.
Yeah.
And then he gives his first joke and hits a punchline, and then all of a sudden they're listening. And at that moment I was like, like I'm not even worried if the crowd is quiet now.
Right.
Because now I realize that's what I want.
Yeah.
Like anytime I've been on stage and the crowd is silent, I'm like, oh, this isn't losing.
No.
This is absolutely winning.
Yes.
And so, you readjust what you think of a crowd and a crowd dynamic. And then from every different audience, you just know like, okay, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to say good evening. And then they're going to respond in some way or another. And I have to be in the moment and just kind of be like, oh, is that what we're doing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that honesty is felt by like, because that's the thing, going back to like how people are like, I know most about comedy shows. People do, there is an innate thing that we all do get humor. Animals get it. Like there's something in like when something unexpected happened, it like your brain's like, what? And there's something about it. But whenever it's just so fun. It's so fun. And for you to like tell an audience how to be, and even whenever you recognize it, there is this trust that even if they're like the one heckling, all of a sudden they're like, okay, so he's just as present in this earthly place as all of us are. And like you just handle it. And I feel like I've watched some people kill on the first show, kill on the second show, and that midnight show, which was such a rarity around even that time. Was there any other clubs that did that?
Fort Lauderdale Improv had a midnight show for a little while.
Yeah. And it was by that midnight show, you literally were like, oh, it's like if you went on 3 dates in a night and the last one you went on a date with was like, I've never even met someone like you. You know what I mean? And so like that was so wild, and to see you know how to handle all of those was wild. Because even when eventually you even do that thing too where you're like, you know what, I'll even try to play with them. And when you really can't win them over, I've been on stage and I've just been like, I've just stared at the ground and been like, fine. I'll start lying. I'll start being like, and my grandma's not doing so well. Like I'll literally like do whatever. Like I'll start to be like whatever. And I've seen you be like, whenever the crowd's just like drunk, like falling asleep, just keep doing it and finding ways to still, like at me in the back, like we'd be laughing because you're like, these guys are asleep. What he's doing is amazing. It's okay if this isn't going that well, because it doesn't take away your confidence. You're not like, oh, this is bad. You're like, I have 2 wins earlier and this one's not, so let's do some math. That seems like it's still a good batting average.
Well, and I think for me too, there's a little delight in it that all of us, when we all watched stand-up comedy and thought, maybe I can do that.
Everyone.
And then we were curious about getting on stage, and then we were curious about, well, maybe I should get up and try these other things. And then we were curious about, well, can I do 10 minutes? Well, what would it be like if I did a half hour?
Yes.
Well, what if I did an hour? Well, what if I toured to different cities?
Yeah.
Well, what would this be like? And when you're up there and it's midnight and it's your 3rd show, and then this group of people is drunk and that group of people is coked out, and you're just like, I was never curious about any of this.
Yes.
And here we are in it.
Yeah.
And by the way, like when I was a kid thinking about stand-up, this is not what I imagined at all. No. And when all of you know-it-all assholes talk about stand-up and how much you know about it. Really? Because I don't remember you talking about the third show Saturday with the group of drunk people and the group of coked out people. I never remember you mentioning that detail.
Not at all.
Why not?
Oh, fuck, right.
So it's I take such a delight in that it's such an outlier.
Yeah, it really is.
There's no way to like talk about it, and there's no like winning in this situation.
Yeah.
The only reality of it is just like, well, it's happening.
Yeah.
And we're here.
Yeah.
So I'll respond.
Yeah.
And that's all we can do. And it's probably the only thing I'm that calm about in my life.
You're so, oh my God. Like, I feel like if every comic could be like, hey, what if we could take a drug of a comic? And like, I feel like you would be the one, you're like, let's take his because he's like unfazed by anything. And it's like, and it wasn't even just because the suit did help. When you would have that suit on, that confidence, like it's so nice. But you would show up on the Tuesdays. I remember being like, oh, he wears hoodies too. Like, I remember you would have a hoodie on. And I'm like, what? And you would go up and it was the same confidence. And just seeing how you would handle those moments, it took me a long time to break that anxiety. And if you can just sit there, even if you're panicking on the inside and you're like, even if you know it might go really bad, just that one breath in, it's weird what they can do. And to go back to your buddy, like you said, like him just doing, I've seen that in clubs and I've tried to do it. And like my buddy Rafe is really good like that in conversations. Like comics will be around and they'll be like, yeah. And he's like, he won't ever fight people for conversation. At one point, he'll just be like, and it's like eventually that person, like someone like me who like I will listen, but if I'm over talking, like sorry for interrupting, he's like that guy, like how you are. You'd be like, no, it's okay, because you know where you're going, and you know how to sit in it, and you're just like, I'll wait. Where the rest of us are like, yeah, and then the story's done, and we're like, oh, where am I? You know what I mean? And you're like,
sure,
in a bad conversation, and so you're it's a huge win to watch you do that because you're so good at making people like. The audience will lean in where it's like I would lean out as the comic, and it takes a long time to try to sit back in the seat to be like, if I'm comfortable, just like with the dog, like if I'm comfortable, they're comfortable. If you come in with this energy, dogs are like, should we have that energy? Because people kind of want to match it a little bit.
Right.
So when you calm down, there's people in the audience that are like, oh, I can't fuck with this guy at all. And then the suit makes me think too that he could also really take control of every part of my life. Like this guy could also like sue me right now. Yeah.
I don't want to heckle because he'll litigate.
Yeah. Dude.
And again, it's a funny thing that like if I go to like traffic court, and I'm trying to, I've got expectations in my mind about, well, this should happen. I want this to happen and this thing. And I need to say this thing about what the officer did.
Yes.
And it turns into this whirlwind.
Yes.
Where I end up getting my ass handed to me.
Yes.
I end up leaving being like, well, I didn't even get to say this thing or that thing. Or and it was my case and it was my right to defend myself. And I wasn't even given a chance.
Yes.
Like it turns into such a clusterfuck. Or I'll go to like a Hollywood party.
Yeah.
And I'll have like, expectations or just I won't know what to do or where to place myself or who to talk to or whatever else. And it's just a feeling of being lost.
Yes.
Whereas late show Saturday.
Yeah.
Which it's another show.
Yes.
It's me. It's the people.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think part of what it is I don't know what's going to happen, which is what nervousness is. People always say, do you get nervous? I'm like, no. Because
I just talked about this with the dude from my favorite band story, the other guitar player. He's like, do you get nervous? And I was like, yeah, I kind of do. But I was trying to explain it to him. And he was like, yeah, I don't really get nervous. And we were backstage right before he was going to go on stage. And he goes, I can't hear my monitor. And I was like, no, that's what we have. And you're not like, oh, am I going to forget how to play guitar? There's just this thing that builds up that you kind of, you don't, just like right now, you don't feel your heart beating, but it is.
Right.
It's like you feel it build up, and then it's just like, it's good that it's there because it helps your brain run, whatever it is. But yeah, that nervousness you get,
So when people say, do you get nervous? I'm always, one thing I'm like, I wish. Because when you get nervous, that means something's at stake.
Yes.
Your brain shoots out a little squirt of adrenaline.
Yes.
That feels good. Your heart rate starts up. You're like, all right, let's go do this.
Yeah.
It feels good to get nervous. It's energy.
Yeah.
But when you really do get into a place of like calm where you're like, well, nervous is just worrying about things that might happen. And I've done this long enough where I'm like, I can't anticipate what's going to happen because the wildest things that have happened already, I would have never guessed.
Yes.
So no use wasting any energy on that.
At all.
But also when I'm on stage, it just dawned on me, like in this conversation, I do know what's not going to happen.
Yeah. Here's
what's not going to happen. I'm not going to put the mic in the stand and walk off. I know that's not going to happen. I have control over that.
Yes.
what's not going to happen? Well, I'm not going to run out of material
Yep.
before the clock is done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to, I might lose my place. I might go blank for a second, but I've got a deep bench
Yes.
of other jokes I could go to.
Yes.
Oh, we'll just start album 1 from the beginning now,
Yes.
and we'll just go through that on autopilot. But what's not going to happen? There are so many things. We're not going to lose gravity.
Yeah.
There's, the environment's going to be the environment.
Yes.
It is what it is. And nobody knows that environment better than we do because we're in it a lot.
You're right.
And I look out at the audience and I look out at people who are engaging in weird ways. And we know it's weird because we're like, I live here.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that what they're doing is weird. And
Yes.
you realize, oh, I've got them.
Yes.
You're lost in the jungle.
Yeah.
You might be loud about it and you might have weapons, but
Yeah.
you are lost in my jungle.
You're right, dude.
And
Dude.
you will never make it out of here before I do.
Yeah, dude. Oh
And
my
so
God.
It's like this level of like you just know. You're like, I don't have to be cocky about it. I'm very just confident that I've been here before and I'm confident you haven't.
Dude, 100%. You are lost in my jungle is maybe like one of the coolest things. I got hot like hearing that. Like that was awesome. You are lost in my, because that is a thing. I am not as confident even in my own home sometimes.
Yeah.
Like if people are like, I'm way more once I'm on stage, that confidence comes. That's you are in my jungle. That's so cool to hear you say that.
Thinking about it too, like I've never been a homeowner. But I do think like one thing that would make me confident in my own home is if I got in there with my hands and like, well, I installed that toilet.
Yeah.
So I remember when things went wrong and I remember fixing it.
Yes.
So I know that's there.
But
And I remember when that wall had a hole in it and I patched it and I know it's back there.
Yeah.
And I know what's around it. Like the more things that go wrong in
Yes.
your home and then you fix,
Yes.
you could really look around and be like, no, this place is mine.
Yeah, but because it's not your jungle, you have to call over another guy from the jungle to fix your plumbing. You're like,
Yeah.
hey, can you fix my I don't know where I'm at. And then he comes over and he's like, you ever like talk to a guy who's like working at your house? Like I remember our old place, we had a handyman and he was nice. We became friends. But like the first time, like, cause I even do construction, but I don't do like plumbing. It's you're like, so you go to ask a guy a question and even how they turn around, they're answering you. And it's like how you talk to a bachelorette party. You're like, so the shit goes down the hole, man. Like you just tell that and you're like, okay, yeah. And you think you're the first time. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect of that. You're like, oh, yeah. So yeah, my shit's a little different. Like I know what's going on.
Right.
But yeah, the more you do a thing,
I
it just
know
builds
shit in this house.
Yeah. Don't tell
Yeah.
me shit in my own house. Yeah, but it really does. And it's like that comfortability and that confidence you get, it helps you, which I just thought about this and you made me think of this because did I hear it from someone or did you tell me? We were talking about this because you said one time that you were walking into a comedy club and you'd already had albums out and everything, I think, and then you were going to the back and they were like, I think you said from how I remember you had like headphones in, you were walking in, they stopped you and they go, where are you going? You go, inside. And you go, I'm a comic or whatever. And they're like, you have to pay. And you're like, oh, I don't like pay. You weren't being a jerk. You were just like that. I've thought about that so many times. And it's like, I've went to hang out and there's a fine gray area that you can't explain to people that like you can't just go into green rooms if you've done one open mic or whatever. But there's this level of once you've done enough to where you're like, you're a part of this. You're in the treehouse. You have the passcodes to all the bathrooms at Starbucks, whatever. It's like you can go into the places that most people can't go.
Right.
And when I think about you, I can't think about I feel like I've been saying this a lot. Stand up I'm not religious, but stand up feels spiritual. And the people you meet feel like people you'd meet in like a book. These people that like help you along your journey and stuff. And like, you've just helped me physically on stage and all that stuff. And I've always been blown away by like how well I'm still trying to handle myself now, how you handled yourself 13 years ago. I would watch you do that and I still am on stage and every once in a while I'll find it. But then I'm just like, yeah, you guys know, like even just now, of course I would fuck up whenever we do the intro. I'm like, I think even you might have told me like, say the name last. And I'm like, guys, Ryan Stout, who, you know what I mean? Like, I'll be like, I just fucked it up and he's the one who taught me that. So I will still lose it, but you were so helpful whenever I started. And I want to tell the story in a second, but I feel like I just said a lot. So I'm just going to stop talking. That was a good thing. That was a good thing I do. You gotta go, I'm gonna stop talking.
I'm gonna stop talking. Anyway, so Ryan's here, everybody. It's a strange journey. And I think part of what's weird is like with people helping you, I really wish that there are so many jobs where people do mentor other people. Like
Always.
in the world of business, that is like step one.
Yes.
Find yourself a mentor.
Yes.
Find somebody who will show you the ropes.
Yes.
And I don't know if, your dad being a firefighter, if
Yeah.
that's like part of that culture.
Yeah.
There's some young kid who's now part of the firehouse.
Yes.
And some older person's like, okay, well, listen, everybody, I'll do it.
Exactly.
I'll take 'em
They do the kind of baby bird. They do kind of help you through because everyone
Right.
knows that they were there,
Right.
and they remember that, like you said, you remember not being helped, and you want to leave the world better than you found it. Which is like that goes more into being a comic to be like. I feel like so many people just want to be funny, and I like people who are kind first, and then I'll decide. Comedy's whatever, but like, and you always struck me as like caring about how everything went, that in things that truly didn't even affect you at all. You were just like, I just want to do this because if someone would have done this for me, it would have helped. And I've actually tried to help people, and I've gotten there are people that do listen, but I've also tried to be a Ryan Stout in someone's life, and they're like, yeah, but like I don't do that. And I'm like, okay, man, I wish I had a suit on right now. I wish I felt good like doing that. Yeah.
Right. And some people just don't. They aren't raised with this idea of being curious or trying to experiment.
Yeah.
They're just not in that mindset. And you go, okay, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't want to like give the impression that I didn't have any help. Like that's not true.
No,
at all.
yeah,
Like,
that's a good point. Who did help you? Yeah. Who do you remember?
One of the people who helped me most was Bob Saget.
Yeah.
He saw me when I was, just 22, 23, and he was instrumental in saying like, hey, I know you do like clubs and things, but you should come with me and you should see what theaters look like.
That's incredible.
So then I got to feel that out, and I got to see why that was different. And then, I was lucky enough to go out with like Russell Peters and have him go, hey, I'm thinking we're going to do arenas. And then you go, I remember I told Russell, I was like, how big's the first one? How many seats? He was probably about 18,000. I said, nah, it's too big.
Are we joking or for real?
No, I mean, I was mostly joking, but I do kind of think that's too big.
Yeah, you're like, should I wear a talking head suit? Should everyone could see? Like, should I get like a bigger suit on? Yeah.
Well, also when you have a certain number in your mind where I'm like, well, the biggest I've performed to was like a half gymnasium at Cornell.
Yeah.
And
how many people was that?
I think it was
3,000?
6,500.
Whoa.
Like it was big.
Damn.
And so I was like, well, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But 18,000's a lot bigger.
Holy
So
shit.
now we're in a whole different space.
Yeah.
And by the way, that first show that I did with Russell in Toronto, you're on stage in an arena where there's a third balcony where if they screamed at you, you wouldn't know what they're saying. So the idea that
if they shot at you, you might not even know a bullet came. You might
you're
you know what I mean? Like
bleeding before you even know the gun went off. And so if you're gonna try to like be a leader in that situation, it's just different.
Yeah.
And I will say that I struggled on stage that first show and got my bearings and went back to the hotel afterward. And fortunately, I had like building blocks that I could sustain on. Set up, punchline, laugh.
Yes.
Set up, punchline, laugh. And even though I wasn't getting the rhythm that I wanted, even though I might have looked like a maniac on stage because I'm putting out more energy to try to connect with more people, which is not the solution.
Right.
The solution is in an arena, you're on stage and there are these two huge screens next to you on stage. And there are cameras out there shooting you to put you on the screen.
Yes.
So instead of like being a fucking crazy person,
you
just look down the barrel of the camera.
Yes.
And then you just tell the jokes. And then you kind of look over there, you look over there, but you're all kind of in this realm. And then everybody in the arena sees you on the screen and goes, oh, yeah. Seems like he's calm and in charge.
What the fuck does that feel like? Can you explain it? How does that an arena feel? Because sometimes you get chills when you're just an audience member and like a team's coming out or something like, what the fuck is doing stand-up like in an arena, man? That's crazy.
I think there is an element of, in a theater, like we definitely like theaters because you can really feel those laughs.
Well, those are set up for spoken word way more than an arena.
But at the same time, because you're responding to the actual sound of like the laughter almost going out in a wave and then coming back in a wave.
Yeah.
You have to respond to that, which changes your rhythm.
Totally.
In an arena, I was waiting for the wave and then the wave, and instead I heard laugh, and then it just dissipates.
Yeah.
It just evaporates. and you're waiting for it to come back, and then it's not coming back, and
Yes.
people are like, what is he waiting for?
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know, my rhythm's fucked.
Yeah.
But what you realize is, I'm not going to hear the laughter of the people in the third balcony.
No.
Not going to happen ever.
Yeah.
I can wait all day for it to come back. They could be the best laughers. They could be sold out. It's not coming back. So you go, this is a big opportunity for me.
Yes.
To just do things at the rhythm that I want to do it.
Yes.
And then people, thousands of people, get to see me doing my thing at my rhythm, larger than life.
Yeah.
On the sides of the screens. And
Yeah.
they get to respond in the moments that I want them to respond.
Yes.
And there's nobody here that's going to throw my rhythm off.
Yeah.
And it's a very empowering kind of situation.
Oh my God. I bet, dude. That's cool.
And so to figure that out, certainly that first show, I feel like I run into comics, whether it's just like, they're online and you like something they did on Instagram and they comment and you comment and there's like a small interaction, like, or you run into them at a club and they're like, hey dude, and I'm like, hi, how are you? And you're like, I remember I met that guy at that show in Toronto at that arena, the first time I've ever done an arena, and I bet that guy thinks I suck. I bet that guy watched me flail around on stage and try to figure it out. But he doesn't know it's my first time on stage in an arena.
You're right.
And he didn't get to see me at show 6 after I'm like, I think I've got this kind of nailed down now.
That was what I was just going to ask you. Yeah, and so that's such a good point, that people that you don't know, like an audience member doesn't know where you're at. Like I remember Josh Arnold said that one time, and I love this story. We were driving to do a college, and he goes, I was on stage, and he goes, I just had to ask them, and I've like said this verbatim, and like, what I go, he goes, can I ask you guys something? I'm not doing very well right now, and they're like, sure not. He goes, do you guys think that this is how I always do this? And they were like, yeah. He goes, no, I'm not. Like, I don't, just so you know, I don't go across the country and bomb. This is like a unique experience. So for you to put that on there, to be like, oh, this guy thinks this is how I always am. He thinks, because even when I started stand-up, I remember at the time, like, I thought that I was like, what is it, like by the third time I'll be in New York probably, but like, I probably won't know everyone on Saturday Night Live. Like, you don't know how long the road is. So a guy sees you at a theater and he's probably like, oh, that's Russell Peters' neighbor. Like, that's like a funny guy he might know or something. Like, some people are dumb. So they're like, they think that you're flailing, but you're like figuring it out. Because I definitely, when I went on the road with Nikki, I love your honesty. And you don't want to tell non-comics that because they don't know how hard it is. But when I did those theaters, the first couple of shows, and I'd kind of talked to Nikki about this, I was like, I just feel off. Because and it was 3 shows in a row each night. And I was like, we did three different shows. And afterwards I was like, I feel like I was starting to get it because I was adjusting my material that like I could do at a club, like almost blindfolded. And I was trying to, and I tried to do that. I tried to be like, give it a second, make it feel a little different. And then I tried to do it like this. And then I tried to change material and I felt like I needed a couple more. But you felt like after 6 shows, then was that when you felt like if you like, you were like, oh, I feel like I kind of can do like arenas. I know it sounds so cocky, but was it about like, did you feel like after 6, you're like, I'm pretty comfy on here?
After 6, I feel like I had learned the lessons that really needed to be learned.
Yes.
As far as, if I do one now, I'm not going to go up and not, I wouldn't have things out of my control completely.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And were you like, would you be like, what's up? I saw your guys' bridge. Like, would you try to like do crowd work or something like in an arena? Or like, what did you do to not have control right away?
It was more of an energy thing. I didn't know how to connect.
Yeah.
I just hadn't figured out like,
look at this guy's shirt.
Out.
Yeah.
Just be very kind of focused in this direction.
With
the cameras and just put your energy there.
And was it 360?
No, it was like
they cut it off.
I would say like 3/4.
Exactly. Which that for stand up, that's way. I've never done stand up in the round.
Yeah.
And I think that I would have an aneurysm. Like
so, I did that one with Saget, and I made the same mistake.
Really?
I was the stage is turning. I don't know if you know that, but
no.
a lot of theater in the round, the stage will rotate.
I would vomit.
It rotates very slowly.
Sure.
So I went out there and was like, oh God, it was just chaos. Like I'm trying to connect over here, and then I'm trying to connect to these people, and then I'm over here, and then I'm doing the rest of the joke there, and then I'm talking to those people. And it's like people are just watching me move constantly. I'm
Yeah.
sure they were nauseous.
Yeah.
And
Damn, dude.
I got off stage. I'm sweating because I moved so much, and I was like trying to look everybody in the eye all at once.
Yes.
And then I watched Bob go out there, and he stands there behind the mic, and he's talking to these people.
Yeah.
And the stage is rotating, and he's kind of talking to these people. And the stage is rotating, and he's kind of talking to those people. And the stage is rotating, and he's not moving around at all.
He's like a fighter pilot with a fucking cig out.
He's
yeah.
letting the stage move him,
Yeah.
and he's letting everybody in the audience kind of take their fill.
Yes.
And then they go, all right, well, he'll be back around.
Yeah.
Or I'll look at his ass for a little while.
Yeah.
Right? This is what the back of him looks like.
Yeah.
I would have never gotten that in another theater. Great. And then so I realized, like, oh, when you do a theater in the round, direct a joke in a direction, give them the setup and the punchline.
Oh, yeah.
And let somebody else see the setup and the punchline from a 90-degree angle. They're looking at you from the left. And let somebody else see it from the right.
Yeah.
And then you go over here and you give a setup and a punchline.
Oh, yeah.
And you let everybody get a setup and a punchline.
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to doing, the setup, half of it's at 12 o'clock, the other half is at 6, and then you do a punchline at 9, and then the tag is at 3, and you're like, just confused.
Yeah. And it feels like it does need to be bigger. I've definitely been on stage and at a comedy club. Sometimes even if you have an act out, you're like, if like someone who's like a big performer, they're like, I can step this way and this way, and I'm off stage. But at those places, I've definitely I've been fortunate too, where it's like when you do those big shows, I've done theaters with like about 3,000, I think is the biggest I've done. And I've definitely tried to tell the joke where I'm like, yeah, do jokes like Bobby Jaycox, you've always done it, but walk around like Chris Rock. Like I'm literally like flinging the thing. I'm like flinging the mic cord, trying to hit jokes, and you're wondering why you're not connecting. And it's like, you don't need to say, and I was a lady. And you try to do this big thing, and you don't know how to figure that out. But that's that thing of like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you do it long enough. And guys like us, like I knew I was gonna have an adjustment. I wasn't like, oh, these 3,000 people don't know what up. Like I was getting like that kind of nervous where I'd be like, okay, try to think like, are you gonna adjust your head this? Because like all of a sudden from being here, you're like, am I gonna look up at them? How is that gonna feel? Where am I gonna land for jokes? And it's a whole internal battle that you try to do while trying to be in the moment. Yeah. It's like I say it's like a date a lot, but it's like, how can you be on a date and be truly interested in the person, but also keep the whole thing interesting? You know what I mean? By being like, is it time for us to move on to go get like drinks somewhere else now? You know what I mean? Whatever, trying to like adjust that. But that's cool to hear you say that. And I've known you long enough, and I swear to God, I would even think about you being like, of course I crushed the arena, because I did the research, I thought about it, I did all this stuff, and to hear you be like, yeah, I was kind of all over the place. I'm like, so it's in all of us. It doesn't matter what. That's the thing that bonds us, is like how we all handle that. And the cool thing about Nikki was her, or any of the people I've opened for, like they know what you're going through. Like they know enough that they're like, even Nikki was like, I was thinking maybe this. Like, and I was like, you're right. She was like, it just seems like it makes more sense. Like, don't do that. Like, I did this bit where I started praying, and she goes, you should start praying. And I go, oh yeah. And then all of a sudden it makes sense for everyone. Like you said, at a theater where there might not be a video, this is visible to everyone in the back, but my face isn't as visible to everybody. Yeah. So her knowing those little, and then all of a sudden that like got a huge thing. And it's like all these little tiny things that you try to do, but other people know. Like I remember I did a guest spot on Regan's show in St. Louis at the Stiefel Center, and I'm that nervousness comes up. And Brian didn't have to do this, but I think he knew, and it was like that thing you said where you're like, I wish someone would do this. He just comes up, and he just comes up to me, he goes, hey, the jokes, like, like the big yellow, like those are all my jokes. Don't do my jokes. Yeah. And I go, Brian, you can't. I'm about to go up. I was like, so you want me to change my whole act right now? He was like, I'd appreciate it. Like he was just like, whatever. And then he got off or whatever. And he was like, I don't remember. I don't remember what he said. He could have been like, I would have just used my joke, like whatever. But like he like, there's something about whenever they make you feel more comfortable too. Cause like I've also worked with comics too, where they will be like, yeah, you were all right tonight. And I'm like, what? We all know we've had those nights. And I feel like the best comics just move on to, I can either help you or let's have fun. And that was how you've always been with me too, is it's like, yeah, if you want to like sit down, we'll talk about the jokes or whatever, but also we'll talk about anything. Like you're very present. I feel like most comics know how to like adjust to all those things, whether you were talking to after, because I also remember after, you're so good at handling moments. I keep thinking about all these things. I go outside, and after I hosted for you, I came up and I go, everyone was in line. I might have stepped in line, and I go, hey Ryan, I want to buy one of your CDs. And you go, okay, can you step over here real quick? Like with us, me and Jeremy, can you step over here?
Why don't you come be part of the show side of the merch table?
And then you go, hey, here you go. Also, you don't need to buy merch. And that's probably maybe when you told me that about going in, like, you're a comic now or whatever. You kind of gave me that anointingness of like you and there was a couple people that like helped me out. But I remember you're like, you're a comic now. And that always felt good. But I was like trying to buy your album. I'm like standing there. I'm like, great show, right, guys? Like, and everyone's like, you're a part of this.
Yeah.
And I remember after the show, you sat me down. And you're like, oh, but that not even like that too. Like not even, you were literally like, hey, do you want to talk about the show? And I was like, do you want to do that? And you go, yeah, come here early tomorrow. I go, early? You want to meet with me not even while you have to be? I remember being that blown away. I think I told someone, I go, Ryan wants to meet with me tomorrow. And they're like, what? Like, so I came in early.
What?
And you go, and we talked about it. I don't remember the order of it, but I remember we talked about it before, but you were also like, you were like, we don't want to make you nervous before the show or anything, but you sat me down, and we had talked about this the other day, and you go, I just want to let you know you're really funny, and you said all those good things, like how you would sandwich something in and be like, hey, but you go, all of your jokes kind of sound the same. And I had a little bit of resistance, and I remember going, no, what do you? No, they don't. They're all about different things, and you're like, but they're the same. They're the same feel. They're just because a car's a different color or whatever.
Energy, same.
Yes.
Tone.
Yes.
Same pacing.
Everything.
Never like, all right, guys, here's what I'm afraid of.
Yes.
Never like, you know what I'm excited about?
Yes.
It's all just Bobby level.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and by the way, that is just the most common criticism that I have been able to offer so many young white guys in their 20s.
Yes.
Because I was a young white guy in my 20s.
Yes.
And I had to unpack what the problem was.
Of course.
And nobody told me what the problem was.
No.
And you can read all sorts of books about stand-up comedy, which I have.
Yes.
And almost none of them point that out.
No.
Which is, you don't emotionally change your energy from joke to joke. Instead, you just have the same similar, well, I thought about this thing about crayons, and then I thought about this thing about boulders. Now I've got this idea about denim jeans.
Yeah.
And, and I don't want to generalize too much, but I think the psychology would support me on this in our culture, which is young white men aren't really taught a lot about emotions growing up.
No.
So for a lot of young white men, stand-up comedy was about, well, here's what I think about stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's what we put on stage.
We sure
and
the fuck
it was
do.
a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
And a lot of audiences wouldn't laugh because people don't care what you think about things.
Yeah.
Or they would connect with like, oh yeah, I can understand why that's funny.
Yes.
But when you connect with them on this emotional level.
Yes.
Of like, guys, I'm afraid of this thing.
Yes.
Or I'm kind of worried about this that might happen.
Yeah.
When you give them the emotion, everybody understands that emotion.
Yeah.
So now they're connected.
Yes.
And the number of great comics who literally say the emotion in the joke.
Yes.
Like once you start recognizing that, it comes up again and again and again.
Yeah,
and again
I think
and again.
Aaron Brooks is like one of my favorite, like, because he's, when I say like his stand-up's emotional, it's just like that, like whatever he's feeling in the joke. Like, because sometimes if I feel sadness in a joke, it's me being like, I got broken up with, and I want you guys to see this as funny. But when someone can really be like, oh, like, or whatever, like when you get those different emotions, and I remember you told me that, and I tried to like adjust those things. And the first time, I remember one time being like, whatever, I was like, yeah, I saved a dog from a fire, and I heard, oh, and all of a sudden I was like, okay. And it's just like this different feel. You're like, I've never felt that before.
I'm telling a story.
Yeah.
And you're emotionally involved in the story.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. And I always felt like Aaron Brooks was like the best at that, at like carrying that on. But I remember because I did try to write jokes at first, and I don't remember this is before or after I met you, but I went to this open mic called O'Malley's, which it was like every city has like these open mics that are like, you go to the comedy club and that's where you go to like try to get work and stuff, but then you like, it's where the comics go. No, it's just us. And O'Malley's was one of those good ones. And we were there, and I remember I went on stage, and I was just hanging out with an ex, and we had this thing happen where it was like funny because I thought we were gonna make out, and then all of a sudden, because she was like, we were laying down, and she was like, could you give me a massage? And I was like, yeah. And then she was like, well, I can like take my shirt off. We used to date, and I was like, yeah. And then I was like, hey, are we gonna have sex? She was like, what made you think that? And I was like, of course, nothing. And I did this bit, but I just talked about it. And afterwards, this guy came up, and he was my buddy Frankie, and a couple other people, JC. Like there was people who came up, and they just go, that was what I like. That was what I liked. And that was whenever I started being like, oh, that was real emotion, because everything else was very much, words. I was like, these words, I'll bring them to life instead of being like, you're alive. Like, bring that there. So that's like my way of saying how you said it way more poignantly. But that's like where my brain would go, and that's what it would happen. And having someone like you try to help, be like, think about it this way. It totally helped me that night because I remember you told me all that and you helped me with it, and we talked about each thing. And I remember leaving there, and I've had this feeling a couple times in stand-up. You know that feeling when you're leaving, and I mean, it feels like magic. You're like, I can't even believe I get to do this. And you had gave me all these great notes. I remember I drove home that night, and I've gotten emotional a couple times while we're doing this. I can feel like the tears back here, and I'm not like, it's just, you're awesome, man. I just can't believe that we know each other. You're fucking so cool.
Yeah.
And I remember you were like, you told me all this stuff, and I remember driving home, and I can remember the emotion. I just started crying. I was just like, I couldn't believe that someone who I could go home and be like, Dad, that guy. Because my parents would be like this. I've said this before, but my parents would be like, you can't be an actor. Like, you can't, like, what do you want to do? Like, that's so stupid.
Right.
Click. The thing you guys watch every night.
You're watching actors.
Yeah. You could never do that. I'm like, I've seen a plumber here, never. And that's a job that they would be like, that has a better backbone than the thing, whatever. But like, and I get their fear or whatever, but.
Yeah, because they don't know. They don't know the way in.
Not at all. And I asked my parents, I was like, have you ever been to the comedy club? And I remember they go, yeah, we went to the Funny Bone years ago. And I go, oh my God, who'd you see? They go, he was so bad. I go, do you remember his name? They go, yeah, what was that guy? Oh, Gilbert Godfrey. And I was like, what? But they hated it. And I'm like, oh yeah, you don't come see me do stand up. But yeah, it's just so funny. Yeah, that was like the first thing they had ever seen. So that's how they relate to it. And I remember I was driving home that night, and I just couldn't believe that I got to do this. And I was crying, and I was sometimes when you're emotional, you don't know what to do. And this is so stupid, but I was my aunt who had passed away, her name is Lisa, and Aunt Lisa was so sweet. She was a very important figure to me. And I was like, I just want to go see her. I think I'm going to go to like her, where she's buried. And I think at this time I was still like kind of religious. And I went to where I was like, and I just remember driving around. I was thinking about stand-up. I was like, I have so much work to do. I think I wrote down stuff. I remember crying into my notebook that night. This is so lame and emo, but you sparked this thing to be like, it was like almost set another thing off. But I drove around, and I didn't know until later I couldn't find her, but it was the wrong cemetery.
Yeah, I mean, nobody goes at 11:30 at night, Bobby.
No one goes at 11:30 at night, and also to the wrong one. And I was like, it showed how in the wrong spot, how much you need people to guide you, because I had no idea where I was going. But I remember I went home that night and started writing new jokes, and I remember I started thinking differently because I had my first act, and sometimes people will do that. They'll do their first act till someone tells them to do something different. And because you said that, I started expanding the way I wrote and trying to like try different stuff. So it's like you set me on like almost, I know we were talking about Lord of the Rings the other day, but like almost as how Gandalf would. He's just like, hey, this is how I would go get the fucking ring. You know what I mean? You don't have to go, and you know what I mean? You might meet other people along the way, but it really did set me on this journey. And like Jeremy was a good integral part of that. Josh Arnold, Nikki Glazer, like all these people who I felt so loved by, just in that world of stand-up, like just like, hey, well, we see what you're doing, and we want to let you follow the breadcrumbs to know that you're on the right track, but you don't have bread yet, but you need to like get it all together. So I can't appreciate enough you did that.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Because I do think there was an element that when I was starting off, I probably had the same kind of mindset that I was going to do a set or two, and somebody was going to go, oh well, you've got it. You've got the nuts. So let's put you. You'll start selling out theaters tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's insanity.
It's insane.
You expect to start and then be there.
Yeah.
And you had a lot of people around you to go, oh, so what you're going to do is you're now on a path.
Yes.
And it's a journey, and you get to take all these other paths if you want, or you could forge your own or go that way. We don't know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
But like, it's a long thing.
Yes.
And so, keep an eye out for this thing.
Yeah.
There's a dragon there, and then...
Yeah. Watch out for that dragon.
Yeah. Be sure to sleep for this part of it.
Watch out for that drunk booker. You guys would you guys really had like a helpful hand to people that... And you don't have to. People get empowerment by being like a gatekeeping and stuff like that. And there are people now that I don't give a fuck to help. But the people that when you see real love in someone's eyes for this thing that you do, you're like, I want you to be different. You want you to be your own person. But here, if I could help you, it's like how I help my little brother. I'm not telling him not to do things. I'll just be like, hey, I've smoked cigarettes, and it might be the dumbest fucking thing I've ever done in my life. So if you want to avoid that dragon, maybe just go this way. And you're still going to run into other things.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be easier if you could keep your level up? You know what I mean? Like, and be happy while you do that.
The dragon's always there. It turns out he's always flying overhead. But if you just wear this hat,
if you just wear this hat,
they won't even know.
Is it a funny hat?
It's a funny hat.
It was. I love that. We were talking about. Can I bring that up at all?
I think we're out of time.
I think we are.
Bobby.
I think we're out of time. We can't talk about that. I could talk to you forever. I really, God, you mean so much to me, and I also do love talking to you because I do have this thing where you've never given me this, where you're never grading me or anything, but there is a point where I'll check back in with you and I'm like, you talked for so fucking long, and you're going to make the best point, and I'll be like, yeah, and what I was thinking is if I was in the round, I would run around it.
Right, you're going to look at the footage and edit this, and you're going to be like, wow, Bobby, you were talking for 6.5 minutes at that chunk.
Whenever I look at the transcript, I'm always just like, they're like, one,
mm-hmm.
The other person with all these really good words, and mine's like, and nothing.
You're going to be listening to you, but you're going to be watching me, and you're going to notice like when my eyes just kind of squint a little bit like that, and you're like, I wonder what he was thinking at that point.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's when he just like started judging me.
Is that when he's like, oh, this guy fucking sucks? Yeah.
He's giving up on me. He's going to throw me out of his house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Well, we're done here then.
Yeah. Bye, guys. Literally forever. We have to get the fuck out of here. But no, Ryan, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for having me stay at your house. Like you've done more for me than I think I ever deserved. So I really, really, really appreciate it.
There's no such thing as deserve.
Yeah.
So thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys. Thank you.